calling all change makers, passion seizers, and people just crazy enough to think they can change the world. A new era for community builders is here. Meet Disciple, the perfect community platform for your passion, people, and purpose. Display your unique brand on every device with your brand colors, your logo, and customizable layouts. Connect with others and share what you're most passionate about with posts, polls, live streams, events, videos, blogs, photos, and private folders to store your content. Power up engagement with private messaging, scheduled content, unlimited reach, push notifications, and unlimited groups. Create an income from doing what you love with paid for content and subscriptions. Your community is in safe hands with data privacy, zero algorithms, and data analytics. We'll support with your growth every step of the way through our customer community, The Collective. Get access to expert live streams, mentorship, community building resources, and connect with other community leaders. Get all these benefits and more with a Disciple-powered community platform. Because sometimes you have to create what you want to be a part of. Join our movement of leaders, experts, and change makers today. Disciple. We take your community as seriously as you do.
Hi everyone, welcome to another expert live stream with us here in The Collective. I'm Nicolette, the head of community and brand here at Disciple. Most of you already seen my face everywhere, but today I'm joined by an amazing expert called Chloe Strange. Chloe, welcome.
Hey everybody.
So Chloe has an incredible wealth of experience when it comes to community management for a whole different diverse amount of backgrounds and context. So she's going to share with us today about what she learned in her first 6 months of working in as an online community manager. So things like on where to focus your efforts as you build out your new community, how to approach planning and goal setting, best practices and experimentations and all the rest of it. So I'm going to hand over to Chloe shortly, but I just wanted to quickly remind you that as per usual, we'll be doing a giveaway. So if you ask us a question live today, you'll be entered into a chance to win a one-to-one strategy session with Chloe herself. So yeah, get your questions ready, pop them in the chat, and Chloe will be ready to answer them. Over to you, Chloe.
All right. Well, thank you so much for the introduction. I'm super excited to be here today and to share my experience with everybody and also learn with everyone as well.
Amazing.
So yeah, ready to get these slides up. Awesome. Thank you so much. And so first, yes, we're going to talk about the 6 lessons I learned in those 6 first months as a manager for an online community today. And just trying to get to the next slide here. There we are. Okay. So my name is Chloe Strange. I live in Boston with my fiance, Jerry, and our 2 dogs, Larry and Leroy, who you can see on this photo. I'm into hiking and rock climbing, embroidering. I've been building communities for over 8 years in diverse contexts in the support space as well as in the classroom. And all of that is culminating now with online communities in the SaaS space. So software as a service. So why did I start this way? It's a quick reminder that getting to know your community members on a personal level is a major component that will drive engagement within your community. So make sure that when you're building out your community, you're showing your personality, that you're making it a discussion. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be conversational. So really dig into that and make sure it's a focus of yours as you build out your community. And yes, personal connections definitely drive that engagement within your community. So now that you know a little bit about me, I was hoping to learn about what brings you here today. And first, I want to know, A, is this your first time building a community? B, I'm feeling lost and or overwhelmed. C, I want to connect with others who are going through the same journey. Or D, all of the above. And I know for myself, starting out, I felt, yeah, I'm seeing some numbers or letters coming in, feeling lost, feeling overwhelmed, wanting to connect with other people. Great to see all of this engagement. First time building a community definitely can resonate with me. I know in my current role, it was brand new to me as well. All right, fantastic. Well, thank you everybody for chiming in there. And I'm seeing also all of the above. Okay, so with the poll, I wanted to get a better sense of where everyone's at, but I also wanted to add another tidbit here. I could just talk the entire time, and I will be doing a good amount of that, but I have a live audience here, so I'm able to lean into that conversational format a little bit more. And this is the same idea that you should think of for your own community. The strength of a community lies in the dialogue and the conversational aspect that you can leverage. So for example, if you are writing an article and publishing something, you want to make sure that it's not just a monologue of information. You want to make sure that you're writing things that are framed in a way that will spark a conversation. So have you added questions for folks, or do you have a clear call to action for people on what they should do next? All of this is important when you are leveraging content in your community. And I will be sharing a good amount of info today, but don't worry, you'll get the slides. And if I want to say, if you remember one thing from today, it is this: don't try to do it all at once. If you try to move forward with numerous programs and initiatives right at the beginning, you're going to feel directionless. And what's worse, you'll have trouble articulating the value of the work that you're doing. And that will really knock you off balance. So that's the big thing here. Think strategically. And what does strategically even mean? I know for me, when I started, that was kind of a loaded word. And I had trouble figuring out exactly what that meant. But what it means is really focusing all of your very limited time and attention on the areas that are going to give you the most impact. And that's really it. So simplifying it down and distilling it into that really helped me to think of how to strategize. So for today, although we're going to talk about the 6 lessons I learned, I also want you to think of it as mistakes Chloe made that I can now avoid in my community. So keep that in your mind. I want you to also think about the things that you naturally gravitate towards and the strengths that you have as an individual when you're developing your community. For me, I really love to design things. I love to think about the customer experience since I have a background in support. And so what I tend to do is go deep in the weeds and try to figure out really the nitty-gritty details when looking at from a more bird's eye view. That was really where I should have been focusing my efforts and thinking about our big goals and thinking about operationalizing our processes. So that is a little homework for after the call today. What is a strength or a focus that you naturally gravitate towards? If you want, you can pop it in the chat too to start the conversation. Because what we all should really be doing is leveraging our strengths. So even if you think it's something maybe that doesn't really align with your community or building it, I'm sure that it does. You just have to think creatively on how you can leverage it to move your community forward. All right. Yes. So how can you leverage it in your own community? So here we are. We're going to talk about maximizing your impact through collaboration, how to approach your planning and your goal setting, your best practices with experimentation, and also how to focus your effort as you build out your new community. Awesome. Thanks for popping those in the chat. Love hearing all of those strengths and how you can leverage them in your community. That's the homework for after the call. Okay. And while we're going through these topics, I'm also going to be sharing very specific examples of how to provide a little more context into the concepts. All right. So collaboration. So what does radical collaboration really mean? It really means focusing on being humble, transparent, expressing strong opinions with kindness, and also proactively seeking your feedback from the stakeholders and other folks that you're working with. And at the core of collaboration is that relationship building piece. And so let's admit it, we all need support. We all need thought partners. Even if you're a one-person operation, there will be others who you'll need to lean on and learn from. So strategically thinking about how your work ties into other team successes will increase your own team's impact. So what you want to first do is identify your stakeholders. And so who would that be, right? Think of it like who would benefit from your community, and then who could contribute to your community. Like I said, you can't do it all on your own. So I think of that where my team on our community, we don't necessarily create all the content that we put out there. There are other folks that maybe have more talent when it comes to creating content, but we leverage that within our community. So again, collaborate with others and see who can get you, how you can make a mutual benefit from the collaboration. And from that, when you are collaborating, inevitably conflict is going to arise. So I do recommend this book, Radical Candor by Kim Scott. It offers guidance on how to establish rapport and psychological safety. And it also opens the door for candid conversations and ultimately innovation. That's where the sweet spot is, right? Being able to openly talk and collaborate with someone else. So when you are having these conversations with collaboration, make sure that you're learning the goals of the people who you're talking with and creating shared goals so that both parties are motivated in moving the project or program forward. And then ultimately, you do also want to stay true to your own community goal. You'll find as you build out your community that there are going to be opinions from every which way on what you should do and how you should focus your time. So make sure that you have a clear message in what you are building and why specifically. How about some collaborations that are working well for you or one that you think you would like to establish? Let me know in the chat. I know for me, there was a time when we were publishing articles from our champion group. And we asked our champions like, oh, what do you want to write about? Just write about a topic that you feel really passionate about. And then that worked out pretty well. But what we found afterwards, we could have made a bigger impact if we had gone to other teams and understood what others are like, what other content people are putting out so that we could have aligned closer with their goals as well. And that would have been a lot more shareable internally and externally. So thinking more broad picture on a larger strategy rather than a piecemeal of different topics would have been a really great collaboration opportunity. Great, yeah. Yes, so using a grant to pay it forward, that's amazing. Love that. Yeah, so a lot of times it's difficult to collaborate because it feels like everyone's so busy, they have so much going on, which is why I really think it's important to identify those shared goals. So I think approaching any of those stakeholder conversations on here's what I can offer you, and this is why you should get involved in this project. So really flipping the script and thinking about the value that you're giving to that person when you're also kind of asking for something from them as well. I know that's been really successful for me. Great. Yes, getting other organizations involved with your work and other communities, that work will just strengthen the value that you're offering as well. Awesome. All right. Thank you for sharing. Now, approaching your planning and goal setting. So with this, the top of the title here, it's seeking benchmarks you may be looking for a long time. This is because when we were starting out, I kept finding that each community was so unique based on their customer base and their product, the age of their community, that it felt daunting to find a clear comparison, but it's really difficult when you're starting out to know even what you're shooting for. What is your goal? Because you don't have any data to back it up. So my recommendation to get a better understanding of how you stack up against others is to research other communities that are similar to your own. And then also take those numbers with a grain of salt, I like to say. I know for me, it was challenging because we were given a peer response rate, and we were like, oh, wow, we're really surpassing that rate. That's awesome. And then we later learned that number was actually for B2C brands rather than B2B brands. And then we found the actual number, which we weren't soaring above, but we were still hitting very well. But that's just another learning in this process. So as you are looking for benchmarks, looking for comparisons of how you should be, the direction you should be moving in, you should be joining other community builders like you are today. You should ask questions, clarify those metrics, and see what exactly does a peer response rate mean for your community. Ask those really targeted questions because people define them differently in different communities. So it's good to have that dialogue. And then I always recommend setting achievable goals. Who likes to set a goal and not meet it? Nobody. So it's important to also make sure that you're starting small with that. And using the SMART goal settings method is something that I found to be very helpful. So that means it's a goal that's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And I like to think of this as like a dream with a deadline. I think that's really, really powerful when you're thinking of setting your goals. So a good example would be like at the end of Q2, our goal is to increase our peer response rate by 5%. That's very clear. We know exactly what we're moving towards. And another tip here with setting your goals is if you any goal you set, you want to make sure that it is within your control. So for example, if I say our goal is to be the leader in in-person workshops during a pandemic, well, that might not be something in our control now, is it? So when you're writing these goals, make sure that you really are framing them in a way that you have control over, that they're specific, and you'll feel a lot more accomplished and motivated as you move along. All right. So moving on to experimentation. Within experimentation, it's super important, right? Because sometimes when you're building something out from scratch, it feels like you're throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. And it's fine to be throwing that spaghetti, but if you watch it fall and you don't learn from it, well, you'll never have any spaghetti that sticks, right? So what all of that is to say is it's important to experiment and come up with innovative ideas for your impactful work, especially in a new community when you have no data to drive from. So what you want to do is make sure that you aren't moving too fast. If you aren't consciously tracking your experiments and your outcomes, you'll be spending a lot of time repeating the same mistakes, and we don't have time for that, right? Everyone's busy. We want to learn from our mistakes, and we don't want to keep doing them. So with that, you should really start with a clear goal and a connection back to your OKR. You should never be saying like, let's try this thing. I don't know, just to try it. Let's see what happens. You should always be tying it back to a very specific main goal that you are going in the direction for. And then you want to also make sure that you know how you're going to measure your success. So how are you going to know when you have met the goal, that you are going in the right direction? You need to define that in everything that you do. So a good example here, when you measure your success, you want to do it in a way that also adds some context. So for example, what sounds better here? We launched a community group and 13 people have posted in the group. Or we launched a community group and 13 people have posted in the group. That engagement is 10% higher than the benchmark for community groups. So you can see there that I'm defining what success looks like based off of what other benchmarks are in place. So that really helps to tell a story and demonstrate the value that you're bringing to your community. All right. Click it through. There we go. And then when you are experimenting, the inevitable is going to happen. You are going to be wrong. You're going to do something and go in maybe the wrong direction. And that happens, and it's okay. It's okay to pivot. Sometimes you had a plan based off the information that you had at the time, or you had a theory that you were testing and you were just plain wrong. So the fear of losing face here, it can be real. Like it doesn't feel good to have to say, we need to do something different. We thought this was going to work and it didn't. So when things like that happen, you just want to acknowledge it and use it as a learning experience. Either way, it's going to be better for you and your team for you to pivot and go in a different direction rather than trying to make something that's not working work, right? And so use that experience, make better to help you make better decisions in the future. And also when you are pivoting, it's super important to also use data to support the decision. So this can be a combination of qualitative and quantitative to demonstrate what was expected. What were you planning on getting out of this experiment that you did? What didn't work? Why didn't it work? And what did you learn from it? And that will be a really helpful way of reflecting on that experience. And then sharing that out if you have other stakeholders who were involved or other collaborators, share that information out with them as well. And then move forward. That's really all you can do when you are experimenting and iterating. Any pivots that folks want to share in the chat? I'd love to hear that too. I know for my community, we planned to have a really diverse group of champions in our program. So we wanted to have partners, and we wanted customers, and we wanted people from all different parts of our community. And we ended up only getting interest from our partners. And so then we had to pivot and really focus all of our attention on building out a champions program only with partners. And they have different needs and different expectations. So it was something that we had to pivot on, and something we weren't necessarily expecting, but it was a good learning. And I'm glad that we went in that direction because it's been going well now. Yes, building your community with your members rather than for them. That's a great call out. Getting their voices at the fore and making sure that they're heard, and you're not just building something for yourself, but you're listening to the folks who are a part of your community and what they want. Definitely. All right. So last section here. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about creating an engaging space. So I know this can feel a little counterintuitive. I know it felt that way for me. If you've worked in like sales or a related field, a lot of times you reach out to the largest group and you are expecting to get the greatest reach from that kind of approach. But what I found in a community is that it's kind of the opposite. You want to focus your efforts on building engagement, and rather than necessarily numbers right off the bat. I think of it kind of like deliverability with email marketing. So if you send your emails to everyone who's ever visited your website, for example, they'll start to get annoyed. They'll start to mark you as spam. And then your future messages are going to land in their spam folders and you'll never have your email read, right? This is the same concept when it comes to your community. Rather than you building out a massive program with hundreds of advocates, for example, you should start out with a very small group of highly engaged users. And you might be thinking like, well, what are 10 advocates going to do for me? That's too small. Well, I have a question for you. Would you rather have 10 really engaged folks who are telling their friends and their friends are telling their friends, or getting 100 advocates who you selected because they seem like they might be engaged at some point, and now you're overwhelmed with the number of folks in this program, and then they're not engaged because you're not paying attention to them, they drop out. So this is just a little story of how it's important to start small in a very engaged way. And when you have that small group of people, you're really able to dedicate more of your time to each of those individuals. And you can analyze much better what's working well and what can be improved. So similar to what the call out in the comments, really asking for feedback. Like, what do you want out of this program? Why do you want to be a part of it? What's going well? What could be better? If you have 100 advocates who are not even that engaged in your program, it's going to be a lot harder to find those really specific targeted pieces of feedback. So start out small and iterate. That will be helpful, and it will make sure that you're not devoting too much time and resources to a program that might not ultimately pan out for you. So it's always good to be agile in that way. All right. Now this one, if you build it, they will still not come. This is a big learning for me in my experience. It's easy to put a lot of importance on a project or an initiative that you're working on because you've spent so much time. And so in your head, you're probably thinking, well, everyone's going to be so excited about this. This is going to be awesome. And then what happens is everybody else has something they're working on. Everybody else has a project that they're dedicating their time to. So it may seem like a big undertaking for you, but then ultimately it's probably not even on anyone's radar. So for any initiative or program in your community, no matter how exciting, no matter how groundbreaking you think it may be, you have to think of it with a clear launch plan and communication plan. Otherwise, all of the time and effort that you've devoted to it will have been not really for much, right? So you should be proactive and think creatively on how you can expand your reach. So even if it's an obvious win, approach it like no one knows about it. And the worst case scenario here would just be, someone thinks, oh, there's Chloe again with that information. And then they move on with their day, right? So if you think you're sharing too much, you really aren't. In our fast-paced lives with the shortened attention spans, it's important to keep getting your message out there. With that said, remember your audience and ask yourself these questions with the initiative or the program that you're creating. Who would care about this? Why should they care about it? How can I make this more concise and clear? And what specific call to action do I want them to take? And it really should only be one thing. It really kind of dilutes it if you give a message with 10 calls to action, for example, then people aren't going to engage at all because they're overwhelmed with having to make that decision. So yeah, one specific example for me, we hosted a wine and cheese event, a virtual event for anyone on the community. They just need to fill out a form and then they'd be involved in participating in this event. And I know in my team, we were like, this is awesome. Like everyone's going to want to do this. And then nobody was signing up. And so then we were kind of shuffling around thinking like, I don't understand, like who doesn't want this wine and this cheese? And so after that was a big learning. And we ended up having to think more strategically about the different teams at our company and the customers that they work with. And we did more targeted communication plans there. So like customers who are already engaged, with the platform in our product, we sent them a specific like direct message and said like, hey, we think you'd like to be a part of this, But we had initially just put it on the homepage on our community, expecting to get a ton of engagement, and that wasn't the case. So that was a big learning for if you build it, they will still not come. Yes, and I love wine and cheese as well. So moving on, we are nearing the end here with some slides. So today I've talked a lot about what I learned as I started out in the community space, and I was also new, we had a new community and I was new to the community world. And these are my takeaways that I've talked about today. So real quick, I'll go through them. Don't try to do it all. Think strategically. Personal connections matter. Make those really, make sure that your personality is really shining through when you are communicating with folks on your community. And radically collaborate. Benchmarks are important, but they aren't straightforward. They do require a little bit more legwork, especially as a new community, and a little bit of research and personal connections. And then experiment and track those outcomes. So make sure that anything that you're trying, you're tying it back to a goal and you're seeing what panned out. Feel empowered to pivot, even if you already have a plan in place. Do things that don't scale and focus on your engagement. And then a focus on marketing is pivotal. That is really a big one for me, especially if you're not coming from a marketing background. That is a big learning and one to carry on. So lastly, I wanted to, I meant to go back here. Remember, along your journey as a community manager, it won't be perfect, okay? But so long as you focus on those incremental improvements along the way and you reflect on them, you're going to have a successful community, point blank. So I hope this was helpful. This is my last slide with some links here, my LinkedIn profile, the article that this talk was based off of that I had published, my consulting site, and then lastly, our community, the community that I manage at Klaviyo. And so I hope all of these resources are also helpful to you. All right. So I see in the chat, which community or community professional have you learned a lot from? Yeah, that's a good question. So I've worked a good deal with Jenny from the HubSpot community. And the reason why I connected with her is we have kind of similar platforms and a similar product that we offer. So I think that's a good takeaway, is like connecting with others who are in a similar industry, or offering a similar product. I learned a ton from her because she's been in the role for a while. She's learned some things along the way, and that was super helpful. How important is the design of a community for the member journey? Yeah, so I think it is super important. So something that we've done is analyze who are the people who are in our community, right? And based off of that information, we tailor the experience to them. So our main customer persona, if you will, is the entrepreneur. And so that means these are folks who, a lot of times they're doing it all on their own, don't have time to really do a ton of marketing research on their own. And so we offer resources such as like help center articles or academy courses that are designed to be done in a very quick fashion, really giving you the information that you need right at the beginning and not having to, spend hours trying to figure it out on your own. So that's a big thing that we think about when we're designing our community. Also making sure that those resources that are very quick and easy to digest are right at the forefront, right on the homepage, and that folks don't have to go trying to find them. So that's a great question when you're thinking about the journey that the customer is taking and that persona, like who is that person? What are their needs? What are their wants? And how can you help them? One piece of advice do you wish you know before becoming a community manager? Yeah. Well, all the things I talked about today. No, I think probably the biggest one would be the starting small and iterating. I think that when I first was diving into it, I'm like, okay, we got to have this program, we got to have that program, and we want to scale them to be huge. But then the more I talk to people in the community world, they talk a lot more about like having direct messages with your customers and your community members. So like just sending a message to a community member and like asking to get on a Zoom with them and share a coffee and learn more about what they're looking for and getting those like one-to-one conversations going. Those are super impactful. And then as you build those relationships, as I talked about in the beginning, you can leverage those to have that be more of a ripple effect. So like building those advocates in your community and making sure that they're going in and answering other people, that makes a huge impact. How do you customize a community for a technical knowledge-based community versus maybe a fan-focused or hobby-based community? Good question. 1 second. Yeah, so my community kind of started out as more of that technical knowledge base. And the way that we were trying to pivot is to offer more inspirational content. And so I would see that as a lever to pull for a fan-focused or hobby-based community. So that means like getting your advocates who are in there, asking them to write articles on their experience and things that have worked well for them and things that they enjoy. That helps to build that engagement and kind of pivot, takes you a little bit away from that technical knowledge-based kind of community where it's more of like a Q&A and starts more of that conversational content in the community. So I'd say, yeah, getting your advocates in there, writing articles and sharing their experience is a really good way of doing that. And you get more engagement too. What do you love most about being a community manager? Some days it can be tough, but I think it's important to focus on what we love doing. Yes, definitely agree there. So sometimes you are going to get some, you can get like an upset customer or someone who's frustrated with the product. And I think what's really motivating to me is that I wouldn't say we get a ton of those. I think people are fairly happy in our community. But when those do happen, remembering that those are your biggest advocates. The fact that that person is really upset and engaged in your community, that's a positive thing. So I like to think of the community manager role from that perspective of like you can have such an impact on the business and also just on your customers because you're giving them a voice. You're allowing them to say what they want to change and that you're letting them know that they have a say in where your company or your business goes forward. And so I think just reminding yourself that you're like, as a community manager, you're kind of elevating the voice of those who you're serving. And I really like to think of it that way. All right, curious about the purpose of our community. Yes, I'm building one for a B2B SaaS platform. That's what we did. So definitely can relate to that. I would love to chat about that even more. Our community at Klaviyo was initially built out to be a way to scale our support team. I think with any product, a lot of times your support team gets overwhelmed and it really, and I was also the manager on the support team at my company too, and then pivoted over to this role. So I have both of those perspectives, but it really, community, it just makes sense, right? Does it make sense like if you're on let's say you're a support agent and you're answering this customer and you give them this answer and now you give this customer the same answer and you're spending so much more time having those one-to-one conversations when you could leverage a community and have 100 people say your answer rather than having to answer 100 times. So I think that's a great direction to go in for any kind of B2B SaaS platform. You're allowing you're providing a support experience at scale, but then you're also getting to show advocates for your product as well. So I know another thing in the support team, a lot of times we get questions like, well, what are other people doing? And what are other email templates? What do they look like? What are other customers creating? And it was very difficult to answer that question because, in that role, you just give the kind of high level advice. You can't say like exactly what other companies are doing. And so I think that's another really great, a positive thing that comes out of communities for B2B SaaS platforms as well is getting customers to say like what they're doing, what's working well for them, and kind of crowdsourcing that information because folks who work at that company, you know how the product works and you can know the general strategy, but the day-to-day work that everyone's doing, that's very shareable and should be shared in those community platforms. Recommended tools for planning and goal setting. So I mentioned the SMART goal setting framework. I think that is super helpful. When it comes to planning, I know that what works for me is I use Monday.com a lot. So Monday.com is like a project management kind of tool. And I really like how you can tailor it to your needs. And it helps to keep things organized. And if you like checking things off and having like a checklist, I also think Monday is also super great for that too. And for your planning there, you can, I kind of did the structure where like we have like a couple main goals, a couple main OKRs that we're working towards. And so for each of those goals, then we put together a number of different like tactics that we were planning on doing for the next quarter. And then those, then all ladder up to that main goal. So I had also another recommendation for planning, I would say, is like you should do like I know it's really hard to think about, but try to think about like your year plan, right? And then break it up by every 3 months or by quarter. And that way you have an overarching plan and a vision, but then you've broken it down into chunks so it doesn't feel so overwhelming. And then you're also able to pivot from those experiences as well. So like, let's say in Q1, you try this one thing, doesn't go great. So now in Q2, you're gonna change to this other thing. So having the overarching strategy is important for a framework, but then having it broken down into smaller bites is helpful too. First meet and greet tomorrow. Awesome. 3 members attending. I know it's summer engagement is less vacation. Okay. But we would like to, what would you suggest to increase attendance for July and August? Very billed and they still not come by. Yeah. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly what your communication plan or launch plan was for this, but I would say what's been successful is like that strategy of seeking out those one-to-one connections. So like, are there specific people on your community that you can send a direct message to? Like, hey, I don't know if you saw, but we're doing this event coming up. We'd love for you to come. Like you'd bring a really fresh perspective to the conversation, like getting them feeling like they would contribute and that you really want them to come and that you value their presence there, I think is a huge thing. That's one direction. You can also think about, is there a clear incentive? Like, is there, you attend and you get entered into a raffle, how can you like sweeten the pot for people who are attending? I think that can be very successful, giving a little bit more of a carrot. And then I think, I also don't know like what went into the research ahead of time, but why are you having the in-person meet and greet? Like, is this something that people were asking for? Is it something people have expressed an interest in? Because it could be also helpful to, after this first one, kind of go back to the drawing board and determine if this is something that people want, or like, is it something that you thought people would want, or have they said they want it? And then with that said though, I know I've had the experience where someone will say, oh, we really want this thing. And then you do the thing and then still no one doesn't engage. So it can definitely feel frustrating. It's like, you told us you wanted this and we did it, but now you're not coming. Why is this? So in those cases, I honestly just reach out to people on a one-to-one basis and be like, did you know this is happening? And if you're not coming, can you let me know why, so we can like improve this going forward? We're building this for you. We really want to create something that's enticing and going to give you value. So like, let us know if it's not a meet and greet, what would be better. And if they don't have an answer, you should come up with a couple of other, like a couple of different ideas. So like, well, what about this? Or what about that? Do any of these sound more enticing to you? Because we really, again, just like really honing into the fact that you're building it for them and not wanting to do something just to do something, no one wants to waste their time. But I'm sorry that you have a lower attendance rate than you wanted. I know how that feels. Yeah. And so what can new and existing community members do to build authentic connections with their members? Yeah, I think something that we've started doing is we're building out smaller groups within the community. And that's been really helpful. Like figuring out what are those more specific interest groups that are within your community. And then you can have those more intimate conversations. Sometimes in a big audience, people feel less inclined to share and more vulnerable. So I would say explore smaller community groups within your community for the different interest groups that you're finding. That's a good one. And then I would say like other authentic connections that have worked well for us. When we started doing this program, where when we answer a question in the community, we'll also send them a direct message with a little video. And that's gone very well. We've had a really nice response to those. So we've used Loom, if you've heard of that before. I really like the tool. It's been super helpful. And we basically would send a video to kind of drive home the point of what we wrote in our response. But it makes it a little bit more personal. You can call them by their name and show your face. And I think that's been pretty successful for us. And I think another thing, someone on my team, they say gassing people up. I don't know, is a term I didn't know about, but I think about that too. So when you're, if you're answering a customer in your community, really saying how great their question was and like how awesome it is that they're on your community, and like how it, like if you're talking to somebody else in the community, you can bring that other person in and say like, so-and-so had a really great answer about that. So-and-so, do you want to tell them what you said over there? Like starting those conversations where you're really demonstrating that person is bringing a ton of value to your community, that builds those authentic connections too.
Cool. Hey, Chloe. That was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and for answering like 3,000 questions. I'm sure our audience really appreciates all that, and you had some amazing tidbits to share. So yeah, as I said, thank you for joining us, sharing everything you've got. And we're looking forward to announcing the giveaway winner. As you said, we've got loads of questions and loads of submissions. We're going to announce the winner in about a week from today. So everyone stay tuned inside the collective. Hopefully it's you, fingers crossed. But for now, big thank you to Chloe, and hopefully we get to see you again.
Yes, thanks everybody. This is great. Love talking to you all.
Thanks. Bye.